In this video, I'm going to be talking about my monthly expenses living in Australia and the cost of living in the countryside in my situation. Every person and family will have a different monthly cost depending on how many family members they have, living situations of rent, or even depending on how expensive their hobbies are while living. So in this video, I just want to share our cost of living in the countryside as a family that tries to budget as much as we can. And the main reason why we try to live a budget lifestyle is because all of our money usually goes to traveling overseas because my wife and I are an international family. I was born in Japan and grew up half my time in California, so I have family and friends in both Japan and America. And because we're constantly traveling between the three countries, having to purchase flight tickets, especially for our kids, starts to add up, especially when we try to fly to Japan at least twice a year. So in this video, I'm going to try to add up monthly costs of living in an average month. We'll start with all the bigger but essential things like rent, food, and necessities, including water, gas, and electricity. And I know Australians like to calculate costs by fortnight, aka 2 weeks, but to make it easier for this video, I'll be calculating and adding up our average cost by the month. So the very first thing that gets taken out every month is our rent. We are currently living in a tiny house cottage on my wife's parents' property that we built that cost $80,000 to make. We were able to keep the cost low by using recycled material and labored ourselves. So currently every month we pay a rent of 560 Australian dollars to my wife's parents that helps pay for rates and other things that the property needs to maintain, like petrol for slashing, and if something on the property needs to be repaired, like the septic tank. It feels like the only way that people are able to afford living in Australia at the moment is if you have a family member or someone who has a property that you can rent for a lot cheaper, whether it be family or friends. But I find it really hard and difficult to understand how people are able to rent without getting help from family members who are basically already established. If we weren't able to pay such low rent from a family member and build a tiny home on the property, our cost of living would probably be near impossible to afford, especially with how much other aspects like food and transportation costs on a monthly basis. We purchased our used vehicle a few years ago for about 3,500 Australian dollars from Facebook Marketplace, and we've been using that car happily ever since. And even though it's very old and the paint is fading and chipping from the sun, we love driving it because it's a very reliable car that fits a lot of seats, especially for our baby seats. It's so old that the windows have to be manually winded down. It gives it a lot of character and charm, I think. We currently pay insurance on our car that comes out to be about $272 annually, which comes out to be $23 a month for the basic third-party coverage. This is actually the cheapest plan, and it means that if we were ever to get in an accident, the insurance will cover and fix the other car, but we would essentially be out of a car. We figured that because our car was so budget, if it ever got totaled, it would probably be smarter to just buy another car. Petrol, or in America we say gas, is probably one of the most expensive part about living in the countryside in Australia because even to get to the closest shop to our house is about a 25-minute drive. And when we drive to school or kindy every day, it starts to add up. Currently, as of making this video, a liter of petrol is about $1.78, and on an average, we spent about $100 a week, so maybe about $400 just on petrol alone. So our monthly average cost for petrol alone is $400. And because we service our own car for oil change and tire brakes, we just go to the local car parts shop like Super Cheap Auto and buy the things we need to service the car. And occasionally, we will go into the mechanic when there's a big thing to fix every few months. And in order to budget our cost on petrol, we try to take the train as much as we can because it's currently only 50 cents to take the train to the city or to the next town, which helps us significantly lower costs on transportation. As a family, we probably take the train about 5 to 6 times a month, so about $3 per person on a train fare per month on average. For our off-grid house, we currently use small gas bottles that we swap at Bunnings every few months, and each bottle lasts us about 2 to 3 months depending on how much we use for cooking. Each bottle currently costs us $31, so every month it would cost about $15 AUD in gas. We would use more gas if our water was hooked up to the tank, but we fortunately have our water heated through the solar that really lowers the usage of gas. The sun heats the panels on the roof of our house that heats up water throughout the day by using the electric panel grids. Having solar panels to power electricity on the property helps us lower the costs. Even though in the past, the solar panels used to fully cover the price of electricity, because of the rise in electric costs, we currently pay about $100 every 3 months from the town electricity to power our house, which comes out to be roughly $30 a month that we use after using all the electricity from the solar panels. I think that if we didn't have the solar panels, it would be a lot more expensive. Having free water is one of the best benefits of living in the countryside. For water, we currently use the roof to catch the rainwater, which gets stored in the tank, and we filter it before drawing it into our sink tap for drinking. So we're essentially able to have water without any cost, and for the garden, we have unlimited access to water from the dam that we use for backup just in case there was a drought. That being said, when it is a dry season, we have to be very mindful of using our tank water, which means less laundry spins and making sure we don't take long showers. My main form of fun in Australia is surfing, and the cost of surfing would just be calculated into the amount of petrol or gas I use to drive to the beach. The closest beach is a 25 to 30 minute drive, so I would try to go to surfing at least once every 2 weeks. I try to make sure that I can align a grocery run or other errands near the beach to make my trip worth it. Besides buying the actual surfboard, surfing doesn't cost anything. All I need is the water and the natural waves, which is fortunately free. So out of the $400 a month on petrol, I would say at least $80 out of it is used on my hobby of going surfing as far as petrol costs, but that is already calculated inside the cost. Food is also one of the most expensive parts of costs of living, especially because of the increase of prices in Australia. In our situation with a family of 4 with 2 little kids, we spend on average about $600 to $700 a month on groceries to cook. I think some families will have a lot bigger grocery bills, but because we're able to grow a lot of our own fruits and vegetables and our own eggs, there's a lot of small things that help us lower the cost of food. We also try to buy bulk meat when there are sales and other methods that help us budget our costs every month. We probably spend about $200 on average a month eating out. This is a crazy number to see because that's almost a third of how much we spend on groceries, but eating out in Australia is crazy expensive. A meal out at a restaurant can cost about $20 on average a person, and even more depending on the food and the restaurant. What helps us keep budgeting is by saying every dollar we save in Australia we can use in Japan to eat out at really good restaurants that cost half the price. Alright, so now let's add the average cost of how much roughly things cost in our situation in a monthly expense. So for rent, we have $560. For petrol/gas, we have $400. We have $15 on gas bottles, $30 on electricity, $0 on water, $80 roughly on hobby, but I'm going to include that in the petrol price because to drive to my hobby, that's basically what I mean by that. So $650 on food and $200 on eating out. So we have an average grand total of $1,855 that we spend on average living in the countryside in Australia. This is the cost of our monthly expense in our situation. Everyone has a different situation, but because we are able to significantly lower our cost on rent, we are able to afford the other things like petrol and hobbies and food. I know a lot of people will have different situations where rent is too expensive to be able to afford food, and that's a really unfortunate situation for a lot of families, I'm sure, in Australia and all over the world. But because we're lucky to be in a situation where we are able to rent from family members to live on the property, that is actually one of the biggest ways that we're able to save on cost of living. And because I make roughly about $20,000 a year as an independent musician, it is difficult to save up a lot of the times, especially when we're flying every year. And as I said earlier in the video, everyone has a different situation and spend money in different ways, but I wanted to share a realistic budget life that we currently live by, especially with having children in Australia, which we are expecting will also significantly raise the price of our day-to-day costs in the future as they get older and start eating more and wanting to start new hobbies. But I hope you enjoyed this video and hopefully see you in the next one. Bye!